Hello, my name is Jan Mars, and I'm a therapist involved in a psilocybin trial in the hospital in Groningen, up north in the Netherlands. And today I'm going to be talking to Michelle Baker-Jones. She is one of the lead therapists at Imperial College, and I'm going to talk to a participant in one of the studies at Imperial College, Matt Jackson. So, quite a unique opportunity today to get a glimpse of psychedelic therapy from the inside, to gain an inside perspective. And I'm looking forward to the interview to hear about the experience of Matt and of Michelle. First, Michelle will open it up with a presentation, and she will talk a little bit about the trial, how it was set up, and how participants were being guided. And then we're going to dive straight into the interview.
Hello, my name is Michelle Baker-Jones. I'm an integrative relational therapist. I've been working in private practice for 10 years. And in 2015, I joined Imperial College's psychedelic research team. So in this presentation, I will give a brief overview of the trial design of PsiloDep2 and the ACE therapeutic model designed by Ros Watts, which was formulated really on the basis of the 6-month interview she carried out with the participants in PsiloDep1, and her thematic analysis revealed that the mechanisms of acceptance and connection were key in shifting depression. So the therapeutic model is kind of organically emerged due to those results, as we will explore really a bit later. So as you can see, the trial is overseen by David Nutt, the principal investigator is Robin Carhart-Harris, and the clinical lead is Ros Watts. So it's a mechanism trial comparing psilocybin with a standard antidepressant as a treatment for depression. As you can see, we're a small core team. We have Roberta Murphy, Ashley Murphy-Biner, Johnny Martell, Rosalind Watts, Bruno Gabreldi, and myself. And we were also joined by co-guides that were incredibly valuable to us, Greg Donaldson, Benji Waterhouse, Rennie Harvey, and Graham Campbell. And each month we would have supervision with Tim Reed, who's a retired clinical psychologist and holotropic breathwork practitioner, whose support we found, again, invaluable. So the trial design, there were 2 arms to the trial. It was a randomized controlled trial, and both the guides and the participants were blinded. So one arm would receive two high doses of psilocybin 3 weeks apart, plus therapy and placebo tablets to take after the first high dose of psilocybin to the 6-point mark. And the other arm would be given 2 very low doses of psilocybin plus escitalopram to take up to the 6-point mark. And brain scans were taken before and after the trial to see what's happening in that area. So psychedelic guiding, as you can see, the room that we developed for psychedelic guiding looks lovely and homely and very comfortable. So the set and setting were perfect really for participants to go in and have that deep intrapsychic journey. And in order for them to do that, they needed to feel safe, not only with the space they were in, but with the guides. And obviously fostering safety was really key to the success of people's experiences. And in order to really help people be willing to go in and tackle their issues or go into the depths of their internal world, that we really needed to foster an attitude of bravery and curiosity towards that internal world. All of these qualities are needed for traditional talk therapy. And interestingly, in traditional talk therapy, it's often the experiential moments in which a client has any real shift or insight into their issues. And what psychedelics do is they reliably provide an experiential moment, deeply experiential moments. And I think what's really pertinent to depression is that the inability to feel keeps clients stuck in ruminative thinking. they're unable to think themselves out of depression. These moments of emotion and cognition and syncing together, along with feeling more embodied, can create emotional breakthroughs or transformative experiences. And as we know from the neuroscience, there is a marked decrease in the default mode network activity, which is highly active in ruminative thinking. It is felt this break creates some reprieve or disruption to normal depressive thoughts. So this here is the ACE integration diagram that often we would use with participants after their first experience to explain, I suppose, the principles of accept, connection, and body, and how they might use those principles to hold them until the next session. So Ros Watts developed PrEP and integration visualizations to help prepare the participants for the psychedelic experience, again, fostering an attitude of bravery and curiosity towards their own internal worlds, and acceptance of whatever emerges. So there's very much trying to counteract expectations of a magic cure or magic bullet. It was just that whatever emerges is important, and working with whatever emerges is key to shifting your depression. In the PrEP visualization, the analogy of diving for spiky oysters is used to describe how it might be tricky to prise open and stay with one's pain, but there is the potential for the pearl of wisdom or insight if one can just stay with one's pain a little bit longer than usual. As we know, in traditional medicine, we go to great lengths to avoid pain, and in fact, often deal with the symptoms rather than do the work of looking at the root causes of the pain. And I suppose in this sense, the psychedelic assisted therapy model is about trying to get to the roots and the causes of our suffering, our depression. So the addition to the model is the process of embodiment, which we felt was an important aspect not only of the session, because often participants feel a lot more embodied in the psychedelic session, but also of integration and PrEP, like how do you embody these insights? How can you be more embodied? All these aspects are kind of key to being, I suppose, a more holistic and in touch individual. So yes, so for PrEP, it was encouraging participants to be aware of their bodies through the body scans and visualizations, which encourages them to locate their feelings or tensions within the body and to stay with them a while longer than normally feels comfortable. What's the message in their joy or pain? And this quote here from Ros Watts' paper on acceptance and connection, I think it's in the Journal of Humanistic Psychology. If you want to read the full paper, it's a great paper. So yet, the reminder to focus on the ACE principles has been consistently valued by patients and therapists so far. It is our hope and experience that the ACE principles fit into each patient's therapeutic process so naturally that they are not experienced as directive, disruptive, or formulaic, but rather as reinforcing. This is crucial for the integrity of the treatment paradigm and also for the patient satisfaction. Patient reports from PsyLADEP-1 indicated that patients overwhelmingly preferred a client-centered and non-directive approach compared to more structured therapies that they had tried before. So in summary, psychedelics help to give you an education on how to look at yourself, teaching us how to self-reflect and be vulnerable with other people, which is good for the interpersonal realm and fostering a greater sense of relational embeddedness. So fostering deeper connection, which we know to some degree is often the antidote to depression. And it's important really as guides to unhook ourselves from the role of the expert, to deepen our humility, thus facilitating safety to allow the participant space to access their inner healer and finding a way forward that emerges organically through them. So very much creating and fostering the conditions for that internal process to happen, but not prescribing how the participant should move forward, trying to encourage them to find their own way forward, one that really comes from them, one that's felt viscerally from their experience. And what we know to some degree from PsyLADEP-1 and PsyLADEP-2, though the results have not been published as yet, is that the psychedelic assisted therapy can create some remission from depression and increase psychological flexibility, thus creating a different paradigm of mental health, where the action of the psychedelic and the therapeutic container encourage exploring the roots of our depression with a hope to slowly heal as opposed to dealing with symptoms. And, we are aware that some people have incredibly transformative experiences and shift their depression for a considerable amount of time. But on the whole, it feels as though it's the beginning of a journey, it's the beginning of a process. And I think framing psychedelic assisted therapy as the beginning of a different process, a process of getting to the roots of one's depression is key in moving forward. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And I hope to hear some of your questions in the next session.
Okay, so thank you both for being here. Thank you, Michelle and Matt. Matt, I first would like to hand it to you. It's great that you want to share your story here in front of an invisible audience. And first of all, you've had your 2 sessions about 1.5 years ago in May 2019, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Two high dose sessions.
Correct.
Yeah. And could you first say something about your situation before going into the session? Because you've told me that you've struggled with depression for quite some time. You've had therapies, medication. And
yes.
Yeah, maybe you can tell me something about that.
And let me tell you a little bit about my background story. I'm Matt. I'm 58 years old, father of 3 children, currently living in Kent. I'd suffered significantly from depression from around 2010 up to 2019. And I'd had 3 sessions of 6 months of psychotherapy. I'd tried various SSRIs, things like amitriptyline, to try and get on top of my depression. It was pretty bad. I was at the Last Chance Saloon. I spoke to a friend in the States who told me about the work that they'd been doing at Johns Hopkins. He also pointed me in the direction of the Michael Pollan book, How to Change Your Mind. I read that, did some background reading on the subject matter, was really desperate, was at a really bad place, wrote to Imperial College, having looked at their website, heard back about 3 months later and then got put onto the trial. My depression, and I can only speak about my depression, but if my contribution today helps save anybody, that would be great. I had a lot of what I would call cul-de-sac thinking, where I would think over the same issues. I had lost 3 friends in close succession. We grew up together, so we had a rites of passage sort of bonding. I was the only one left. I lost my job in 2010, then had a period of starting a new business, compounded with the loss of my close friends. I became severely withdrawn and isolated. That damaged my relationship with my then wife. We're now back on great terms, but no longer married, and put an awful strain on my relationship with my 3 children and other close family members. So I was at the Last Chance Saloon. I then got interviewed, very carefully selected and screened to go on to the Imperial trial. And I was pretty committed. I was wanting to make a change. The team at Imperial, Michelle, Roberta, Roz, Ashley, and Dr. Martell were very good at managing my expectations. As Michelle explained, it was a double-blind trial, so at that stage I didn't know whether I was going to be having a placebo or whether I was going to be having the real thing. So that's how I got from my GP surgery, very limited mental health support in the community, to a world-class gold standard trial, which was extremely well run.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And so you've had 2 sessions, and
3 weeks apart.
Yeah, maybe you can tell me a little bit about the different dynamic of the two sessions and what you've experienced also after that first session, what kind of changes you've noticed.
Um, well, as I said, I did quite a lot of background reading. I knew potentially this could be a very significant experience and emotional, experience. Um, what I really liked about the process at Imperial, regardless of whether I had the high dose or not, was that it was very different to my previous psychotherapy. It was much more supportive. It was much more team-based. And it did that there wasn't that sort of client practitioner traditional relationship. Um, I was psychedelically naive, so I had that classic psychedelic experience. But the team were really good at saying, look, you just accept the images, don't try and fight them, and that's exactly how I went into it. Yeah, it was the first 15 minutes were very pleasurable. I had great sensations in my legs, and then I put the blindfold on, and the music just took me on that journey. It was the sort of roadmap. And yes, classically, in the first 40 minutes, it was a wild, mystical place, highly mathematical. There was a lot of hieroglyphs, but then it became incredibly physical. And all of the issues that I've been wrestling with, my mum and my relationship with my mum, my relationship with my sexuality, the loss of my friends and my inability to sort of grieve and accept that they had gone, and my guilt around not feeling I'd been supportive enough for them. All of those problems were literally presented to me. And I had this sort of massive breakthrough where I was taken to a place of absolute love, where my subconscious just said to me, look, you are okay. It is okay not to be okay. You can be kind to yourself. And I suppose internally, I allowed myself to just accept those feelings and move on from them. And the trade-off was that massive transformation. For me, it was incredibly transformational. I felt, when I came back, back sort of round out of the psychedelic experience, it was like I hadn't felt for 20 years. I mean, I felt like I was 24 years old. I had hope. Where there was despair, there was hope and opportunity. I was, full of the joys of spring. And that was pretty much 6 or 7 hours after the first dose. But what I found most informative and I suppose inspirational for me was the work that I was able to do post the experience. So prior to the second dose, I worked through a lot of stuff. I was able to see that my mum had been a ballerina. She had been highly controlled, her food, her emotions, her physicality, and that was her style of parenting. I was able to forgive her for the way in which she presented myself and my brother as, ornaments to be admired. The same clothing, all of that was terribly distressful for me because she was never demonstrable. She was never demonstrable in her love. There was no hugs, there was no kisses, but I could forgive all of that and accept.
And Matt, if I can interrupt you for a moment, did you feel like in the second session you deepened some of the issues that came up during the first?
Yeah, the second session, very much so. So one of the other things I saw prior to coming into the second session, that I worked on this issue, was how I was looking at my then wife. I was trying to find love for myself from her and substituting, her affection for I was not being kind to myself, and I was trying to get that kindness from somebody else, which is a very selfish thing to do. So in the second experience, again, it was classically psychedelic for the first 40 minutes. There was a big thing with jungles and cats, but then I basically did that sort of classic Tibetan Day of the Dead thing, where I went back through my teenage years, formative years, childhood. I then became a sperm and then a zygote, and I totally disappeared. And then I was in a place where I had no speech, I had no real emotion. It was just like floating in a black void. And then suddenly I reconfigured and came back through a similar journey.
But some people, if they hear your story, they might think like, wow, this is a very awful place to be in, maybe, or it's very overwhelming. How did you cope with being in that
Yeah.
void?
Well, it was really the work that Michelle and Johnny had done with me. Yeah, I was shit scared. I mean, it was an incredible feeling, but I was able to, I lost all sort of rationalization when I was in that void, but I was able to say, just go towards it, accept what's happening, and be kind to yourself. It was a very healing experience, the first experience. So I took that as one of the tools. Although the second experience was really frightening, it was very insightful. So I had that confidence somewhere within me which said, look, this is going to be okay. Go with this, because if you work with this, it's going to help. And I think at that point, if I'd tried to back away, it would have been all too terrifying. For me, it was important to get right up close to all of those issues. And I was able to do that.
And how did you feel the therapeutical guidance helped you in surrendering that experience?
It was completely non-directional on both occasions, and it was incredibly supportive. In my first experience, it was incredibly physical for me, particularly just before the peak. Excuse me, there's a cat. It was incredibly physical. And Michelle and Johnny were really good. They passed me a blanket because I felt quite cold. I had quite strong body tremors. And then I felt the need to, use my hands and be quite physical to sort of experience and try and face the experience. And it was really good. There was no direction. There was just support. And I have to thank one of their other colleagues, Bruna, who provided some really nice blackberries and strawberries. And at the end of the experience, it was lovely to taste those.
Okay, thank you, Matt. And Michelle, what I would like to ask you is, because Matt was obviously really committed to go into this experience, and he seems to me as like an open and also talkative guy. What do you think about participants who are more withdrawn, more closed off, with less maybe also introspective capabilities? Could they profit from this experience as well, or do they need a different approach?
There were definitely different participants who are less open and less communicative as Matt. And I suppose as long as we felt they trusted us and we had a decent enough rapport, then that was fine. Often we're negotiating how close they want us to be. We do always offer the hand-holding in the ascent of the experience. And as long as most people are okay for that, I think that's really crucial, because it just demonstrates a willingness to kind of receive, the basic minimum of care. But yeah, no, there are definitely some people who are a lot more reserved and a lot more internal. Matt, like he said, he was very physical. He was kind of swimming, I think, towards issues, and so he was very free and sort of uninhibited. Whereas I think, other participants were maybe more inward, in their own experience and less needing our support, but it didn't really diminish their experience necessarily. And I think the fact that we had 2 sessions meant that they were probably a little bit more open on the second session. So I suppose it's like a gradual bonding. Whereas I think Matt was very receptive initially. He was very open, and as he said, he trusted us and he felt very at home with us from the offset. So which I think, allowed him to have these 2 very huge experiences, because that trust and that openness, we use the mantra, trust, be open, let go, which is a Bill Richards famous mantra. And in and through, which, all the things that Matt basically was able to do, whereas someone with a bit more resistance might need a bit more encouragement, or we might have to breathe with them. So, there are ways to help people, and working out what they need is something I suppose you do on the fly when
Right.
You're there.
Yeah, thank you. And it also seems like there's a lot happening in the moment. a lot of things that you cannot expect to happen. So how is this different for you as a therapist in guiding these sessions than in doing your regular talking therapies? Because I assume there's maybe even a different mindset when it comes to
Yeah.
psychedelic therapy.
Yeah, I suppose because they're very much in an altered state, where they might be, and you can't maybe check in with them so easily. So you're having to maybe read their body, and be conscious of the fact that they may not be able to verbally explain what's going on. So yeah, so there's a lot of maybe just trying to read and intuit, and sometimes just have a sense of what you feel in your own body too, which you may well do in traditional talk therapy, but because often it's so much more verbally dominating, you're maybe paying less attention to the body cues and that kind
Do
of
you
thing.
feel that you do that more in a psychedelic therapy, that you're more attuned to your own body and what's going on inside?
Yes, I think it's something I'm slowly improving, becoming more, it's not something perhaps I was so aware of, but I think the importance of that has become a lot more clear to me, in that there is so much information in what's happening bodily between, I see us in a relational field, even though that the person is, deep in their experience. I do feel that, our warmth and our presence is really key, and that we have to, even though we might, momentarily go off and not be present, that we're always kind of working on keeping that focus and that presence there for the participant. But yes, it's very different, because in traditional talk therapy, you occasionally have these experiential moments where things shift, but in psychedelic therapy, it happens all the time, and they can be hugely transformative, as Matt's was. And that's amazing and humbling to see. It's a lot more intense. Traditional talk therapy is slowly, but yeah, so it can be more intense, but often more rewarding, because you can see that transformation happen in a day, which often in talk therapy it takes months and months and months for that kind of shift to happen.
Right. So that's like, yeah, it's more demanding, but it's more rewarding at the same
Yes.
time.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe shifting back to you, Matt, how did you feel that the connection and the relationship to your therapist was different than therapeutic relationships you've had in the past?
Well, I think if you're in if you're in a traditional patient psychotherapist relationship, there feels like you might be having sessions maybe twice a week or once a week for, say, 50 minutes. It's very routine. You feel like there's an obligation to discuss stuff. You don't sit there, but for me, it's a very different dynamic. There's more obligation, particularly if you're paying for your therapy. Mine was not provided under any state-provided therapy. So I suppose the most important thing is that your ego is present, and that tends to get in the way. The therapy that I experienced at Imperial removed my ego, and that was a very helpful thing.
And can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on that? Like what removing the ego? It sounds a bit abstract, maybe to.
Well, your ego is always in play, isn't it? During sort of conscious states, reminding of you of who you might be and what you might like. But when you're in a psychedelic state, your ego is pushed to one side. The curtains are opened, and actually, it's very revealing. And I think that's part of the healing process, allowing those other thoughts that have been maybe suppressed or not allowed to come to the fore. That for me is the healing part.
Right, and that also seems to be it seems to open up a kind of ability to have a different connection with the therapist as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And for me, there was a great significance, particularly on the second experience, of connection with nature, that we are all connected and that we all as human beings play a part, that any small act of kindness can have a conglomerate and effect. So it was a very, very, and that had not been my mental state prior to this experience. So there was a very strong connection with, we are part of the planet. We need to respect the planet, and the planet will respect us. There was a very strong connection with the universe, and the humbling part was the part that we all play. That we have a duty as citizens to be connected.
Beautiful. And the question I sometimes get from people is, okay, you have these intense experiences of connection during the psychedelic session, but do you maintain this feeling? And now it's 1.5 years past.
Yes.
1.5 years have gone by. How do you feel it is right now? Is this a feeling that's still there?
For me, it's like winning the Euro Millions. I can think back really fondly on those two experiences and do daily. There isn't a day that goes by without me thinking warmly about the experiences and what I learned from those experiences. And I've applied that experience to resolving, key issues in the here and now, relationships, difficulties with, business problems. It's been very, very insightful. It's given me a sort of, I suppose, a sort of sage and wisdom-like quality where I will think about things carefully, but not, I still execute, I still make decisions, but it's given me another sense.
Right, and it seems like you've really integrated those insights and into your personal life. And I wonder, do you think those sessions were enough to be able to do that, or do you feel that the integration afterwards was also or played an important role in being able to integrate?
Well, I think the whole team at Imperial did a great job at providing a lot of post-experience integration and support. They were very, very thorough. I don't think in a normal healthcare situation you'd be able to indulge your patients as much as they did. So for me, that was very important. But I would say to everybody listening, for me, the post-experience insights were as profound and transformative as the experience itself. And that's what really blew me away, how it changed my problem solving and thinking towards some of the issues that I had faced 3 to 4 weeks after each of the experiences. And whilst it's not as profound as it was, immediately after the session, that's something that I'll hold fondly in my heart for the rest of my life.
Right. Wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle, going back to you, how does a therapist, how is a therapist able to do this kind of work in the long term, staying healthy, mentally healthy? I mean, this is work that can affect your personal life, maybe a little bit more than any kind of regular talking therapy. Like you say, it's more demanding,
Yes.
it's more intimate. Maybe you can tell me something about what you do to maintain your balance.
So I suppose, yes, ramping up my self-care routine, really. I'm very fortunate in that I have a very supportive husband, and my children are now, almost in their teens, so they're demanding less of me. So yeah, and that comes back to, so I meditate, I do transcendental meditation, I do yoga, and I do often do a jog out to Richmond Park, which to me feels really important. So I have that connection with nature. And, I have a great team, a peer team that I can talk to, because I also run the integration group. So I do have, and my private practice is probably half now people looking for prep and integration for psychedelics. So I have, I suppose, a network of people I can talk to as well, which I think is really important. Like the psychedelic experience, if you don't have other people you can talk to about the issues that arise, then, it can become incredibly alienating, which is, I think, community and integration groups are incredibly important for this reason.
Yeah, and can you say a little bit more why you think that's really important for a therapist?
For a therapist to do this work, because I suppose, I'm a flawed human being, and I need to also be mindful of my own shortcomings, my own blind spots. And, you know, part of this would be, so occasionally in our training, we do things like holotropic breath work. So going to these altered states and knowing what it's like traditional talk therapy, to be in, you know, to be in the altered state, to be asking of someone else, to be supported by someone else. So kind of deepening my capacity to ask of others so that I can, you know, I can be receptive to give to others too. So to me, it feels like very much a two-way process, you know, we're constantly growing and developing, hopefully.
So you have to be at the other side as well. To
Yes, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think a few more questions and we have to wrap it up. There was a question from the audience, Matt, that I liked about the music. And the question was, what was the significance of the music during the experience? Can you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, the music for me was the roadmap to take me on my journey. There was a very strong symbiotic relationship between the music and the experiences that I was feeling. And so they were, I found the music amplified the feelings, and some of those feelings were frightening, and some of them were beautiful. But for me, it really helped. I just went with it. So I took the tools that Johnny and Roz and Ashley and Michelle had given me, and it was very, very important. And I, you know, very close to the peak, there was a particular track which I often listen to now, you know, and I get the, you know, that warm, nice feeling of that particular experience. So for me, it was absolutely key. And I think I wouldn't want to do this without music. So I'm a very big fan of the blindfolds. Keep the blindfolds.
Okay, that's very clear.
It's all too weird when you have the blindfolds off, guys.
Okay, and do you feel your relationship with music has changed, Matt, after this experience?
My taste is much more eclectic. You know, if you look at my Spotify account, it's really, really broad and wide now. So yeah, that was great. It was super.
Thanks. Okay, last question. Because this study and this particular psychedelic session was being done in a setting which it was at the Imperial College, in a
highly institutionalized
setting in a hospital.
No windows.
No windows. I think some plants.
Pretend plants.
But Matt, if you could have done it, again, and you could have, you could choose the ideal setting to do this session, how would that context look like? How would that setting look like?
Okay, for me, it's got to be an eco lodge in the forest. It's got to be close to nature. It's got to be able to. I want to be able to touch Mother Nature and Mother Earth. For me, that would be the ideal scenario. I took a load of beautiful flowers from my garden into the second session, so I took Mother Nature with me, and it was quite incredible. The smells were just divine.
Okay, so a more kind of earthy
absolutely
context. Okay, thank you. Thanks to both of you for your openness, and thank you, Matt, for sharing your beautiful story. And probably motivating and maybe even inspiring some people out there who are still struggling, to open up for this kind of therapy.
Yeah, go get it. Bang on some doors, guys.
It's legalized psilocybin. Reschedule it.
Yeah, we're all hoping that. Okay. Thanks to both.
Right, thank you, Jan.
Thank you both, Jan. Take care.
Okay,
bye.
Bye.